Welcome to the Spark Creativity Teacher Podcast, a podcast for English teachers in search of creative teaching strategies. I'm Betsy Potash, and I'm glad to welcome you to episode 37, all about ways you can cut back on your end-of-year stress and stay creative through the last month of school. As the end of the year approaches, sometimes survival feels like the name of the game. Keep showing up, keep trying to smile, keep from getting mad at anyone when you're feeling exhausted and in desperate need of a break. It's so tempting to put up a big countdown chart on the board and root for summer along with everyone else. But the problem with counting down is it doesn't really speed things up or make you feel better. It puts all the emphasis on what you don't have yet. I remember one summer in college, I was working at a candy store called Hepzibah's in my hometown. It was a pretty great place, but it could get a little dull. The summer afternoons dragged when customers were scarce. When beachcombers and weekenders crammed in, happily demanding that I make them custom Jelly Belly mixes and gift-wrapped boxes of chocolate rocks, the time flew by. The end of the year will actually come a lot sooner when you and your students are busily engaged, doing the same good and important work you've been doing all along. But the tempo and type of work just need to shift a little bit to fit the season and to fit your mood and the students' mood. So with no further ado, here are my favorite 5 strategies for making this month fly by smoothly, successfully, and creatively. Okay, my first and perhaps favorite strategy is don't leave major grading until the end. Oh man, this is such an easy mistake to make. You're probably already going to have some kind of giant final exam, project, paper, or test, and you will have plenty of grading to deal with. Your students will also have final exams, projects, or tests in all their other classes, as well as major assessments in almost all of them. So there's really no need to collect a major assignment like a multi-genre autobiography, a semester's worth of blog writing, or a giant research project on the last day of school. It's just too much. When you give yourself this much grading, a major assignment from every single student, and a major final piece from every single student that counts as their exam grade, you're going to be so buried and you're going to be dreading that all throughout the last month. So I would really recommend you wrap up with a big, huge assignment with a few weeks left to go, so you have plenty of time to grade it, and then use those final weeks for something interesting, something creative that you're going to enjoy, but that it doesn't have to end in this huge grade that's going to take you dozens of hours to put together. Okay, strategy number 2, create windows of productivity for everyone, and that includes you. Whatever you're doing at the end of the year, build some productive work time for that particular thing into your curriculum for your students and use that time for yourself too. So no matter what they're working on, it could be a Genius Hour project, they could be working on final exams, doing a final free choice reading book and creating one-pagers, whatever creative thing that you have them focused on, build in some work days. They are stressed, they are tired. Let them know that if they use that productive time in class, they're going to have less work later, and it's just going to benefit them and it's going to help keep them on track. And then don't be shy about using a little of that time for yourself too. You're going to be a better teacher if you, yes, walk around and check in with them, make sure they're on track, but also use that time to neaten up some of your loose ends. So if there are a bunch of students that you need to check in with about missing work, check in with them. If there are a few students who have some kind of outstanding quizzes or tests they need to take, just have them get it done in class. Check off all your boxes. Send those few parent emails that have been hovering in the back of your mind for months. Grade that last little batch of quizzes that's sitting in your drawer that you just have not had time for. Look up now and then, make sure your students are doing well, that they're being productive just like you. Make it a pleasant space. open some windows, listen to the birds twittering, maybe bring in some cookies, but just have some special productivity time for yourself and your students. You can even galvanize some early finishers to help you with some projects, whether that's straightening up the books in your classroom library or it's taking down some displays. Just start to get things done so that you feel like you're being productive right alongside your students. Strategy number 3, clean it up bit by bit. There's nothing like trying to grade 50 projects in a row to let you know it is totally impossible to grade 50 projects in a row. Same with writing grade comments, same with wrapping up your grade book for every single student. As things are finishing, try to alternate the types of work you are doing. So rather than trying to plow through all your grading and all the organization of your papers and grade book, and then spending 2 dusty, dirty days cleaning and reorganizing your classroom, try to change it up. Grade some assessments, then go over to your favorite displays. Take photos of them so you remember for next year, and then put everything away. Then grade some more assessments, then go over and start deconstructing your bookshelves. Grade some more assessments, and then hit that bookshelf where you've been shoving stray papers and water bottles for the last 6 months. I think it's really helpful to alternate the work so that you're kind of standing up and moving around and imagining your space for the next year, and then you're going back to the more sitting, focusing type of work. One more quick tip here, keep a notebook handy or have a special folder on your phone for pictures so that you can be either jotting down or taking photos of what you do like about your classroom, because though summer seems swift to teachers, it is intense and it's easy to forget. As you start the next year, you're going to be thinking, now what did I have up on these walls? How did I finally figure out to organize my books that work the best way? It's just kind of nice to have it all laid out for you so that when you return, you are ready for action. Number 4, choose a creative exam and use the last day of school to have students present it. Now, this one is pretty dear to my heart. I just absolutely love to use the day when most students at the school are staring at reams of multiple choice questions to have my students presenting creative final projects. It makes me happy. I think it is much more like what they will experience in college, what they will experience in the world, for them to process what we've learned and give it back to me through some sort of creative medium rather than answering test questions. And I realize that that may not be an option for you, in which case doing a final project in those last few weeks is wonderful too. But if you can, substitute in a creative final exam for that 3-hour chunk where they're sitting and looking at short answers and matching. I think that's really wonderful. So one of my favorite creative final exams is to have my students write a graduation speech, and I ask them to argue in their speech for the power of reading. And I give them some sort of subheadings. I ask them to argue that literature helps people understand themselves better. I ask them to argue that literature helps people understand others and develop more compassion and empathy. I ask them to argue that literature helps them understand history better, and I ask them to argue that literature illuminates important issues of morality and choice. So usually I just have them choose some of these and choose some of the texts that we've studied to use as evidence, and then they create this speech, and on the last couple of days of class, they give those speeches. That's one that I've done that I've particularly liked, but I am going to link in the show notes to a whole bunch of different ideas for creative exams. So if you're looking for a creative exam and you'd like to try out this tip number 4, for spicing up those last couple weeks of school, this type of exam is great because it allows you to work with the students throughout the last week, answer their questions, give them time, maybe go to the computer lab, or if you're one-on-one, let them actually be writing in class and working with them on it. And then you can actually have them present back to you on that last day. All right, strategy number 5, finish with positivity. Okay, so have you seen that old classic movie, Pollyanna, where there's a little girl who always is looking on the bright side of things? I have to admit, my brother used to call me Pollyanna while we were growing up. I made it to All-American status on my college tennis team with a smiley face drawn on my racket in pencil ink. I look for the bright side when it's possible, but I've also seen plenty of rough moments too. Still, at the end of the year, I believe it will really change the way you head into summer if you can try to leave things in a positive place. Everyone is tired, everyone is stressed. Sometimes the annoyances have built up so much, the faculty drama has become untenable. But if you can find a way, if you can be the voice of positivity with your students, with your fellow faculty, with your administration, it can make such a difference in the way you go into the summer with your mindset. So here are a few ideas I have to help you make that happen if you wanna try some of them out. So number one kind of goes along with what we've been talking about. Choose a creative activity for the last few weeks of school. So even if you've been frustrated by test prep, if you've been frustrated by a lot of curriculum being handed to you and kind of forced down your throat, right at the end, try really hard to teach something that you love. It can even be an isolated thing that's just a few days. Maybe you do a really smashing blackout poetry unit, or you do an amazing one-pager with your students on a couple of podcasts that you listen to together. Find a way to finish with something creative and beautiful that means something to you all. Another idea is to plan a special way to say goodbye to your students that means something to you. So you could write them a short letter, not an individual one for everybody, but just a group letter about what you enjoyed about being their teacher. Or you could take your class out on campus somewhere beautiful and take a picture of them that you're going to put up in your room and tell them, they've really meant a lot to you and you want to remember them, and that's why you want to have their picture. Or spend 20 minutes in class one day and put together a little top 10 list, the top 10 moments of the year, and let them contribute their thoughts to it. So you have a chance to kind of reminisce about the most positive parts of your experience together. Then write it up, print it out, and give it to them. Another nice way to end on a positive note is to share something great you've done this year with one of your administrators. So invite your department chair to see your students present something creative that they've been working on in the last few weeks, or send photos of a really cool project or display of amazing student work to your principal. Go ahead and be proactive in letting these folks know you are doing your very best and that your students have done wonderful creative things this year, whether or not that work was ever happening when an administrator happened to be visiting or walking by. And finally, spend 15 or 20 minutes. I know it's really hard to fit it in, but if you can, spend a little time writing down your takeaways from the year. What worked really well? What was tough that you really need to change for the next year? What needs attention over the summer? That kind of reflection can lead really easily into a little time of writing down 2 or 3 goals for what you could accomplish over the summer. Before you switch off and completely out of teacher mode, just identify a couple of things that you could fit into your summer that would help you be a better teacher the next year. Maybe it's revamp one unit that didn't go very well. Maybe it's learning about Genius Hour because you want to try it next year. Maybe you're going to listen to a teacher podcast like this one or another one while you're going on a summer camping trip or something. Maybe you're going to tour around during your travels and look in some used bookstores and try to find some new outside reading books. Whatever it is, just identify a couple of things so you don't have that general feeling that you should be working more all summer long, and you just know a couple of things that you're going to do that are going to give you a boost for the next year. So I hope that amongst these 5 strategies, you found one that seems really great for you, or maybe 2, or maybe 5. Thanks a lot for tuning in with me today. If you'd like to check out the show notes for today's episode, just head to www.nowsparkcreativity.com and click on the podcast tab at the top of the page. There you'll find links that I've mentioned, as well as a write-up of the show to help you remember these ideas whenever you need them. Then join the conversation in my Facebook group, Creative High School English. You'll be joining over 2,000 other amazing creative teachers from all over the world in our community effort to become more innovative in the classroom, supporting each other along the way. The Spark Creativity Teacher Podcast is a proud member of the Education Podcast Network. The Education Podcast Network, podcasts for educators, podcasts by educators. For more podcast recommendations, visit edupodcastnetwork.com.